Move, old woman, before I have someone wheel you out and end this little pity show myself.
I don't want pity, officer. I just want to eat my breakfast in peace.
Peace? You don't get to roll back into this town after all these years and pretend you're just some harmless old lady?
I came in, ordered my food, and kept to myself. You're the one standing over me.
You think that chair protects you? You think people are scared to touch you because you look fragile?
The officer leaned down until his face was close to hers, smiling as the diner stayed silent.
Nobody's saving you today. Not these customers, not anyone outside, and not those boys you keep pretending still need you.
Evelyn's hands tightened in her lap, but she did not look away. What he didn't know was that the boys he mocked had become soldiers, and they were already walking through the door. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of Ruby's diner, casting warm light across the red vinyl booths and checkered floor. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air, while the soft clatter of plates and quiet conversations created a peaceful backdrop. Evelyn Baptiste sat in her wheelchair beside booth 7, her purse resting neatly in her lap as she finished the last bite of her scrambled eggs. Her doctor's appointment had gone well. Her blood pressure was stable, her medication was working, and Dr. Martinez had praised her for staying active despite the challenges. At 66, Evelyn still moved through life with the same quiet dignity that had carried her through decades of struggle. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue dress was pressed and clean. She believed in presenting herself with respect, no matter what the world threw at her. Ruby Mercer wiped down the counter near the coffee machine, glancing over at Evelyn with a warm smile. "You need anything else, honey? More coffee?" "I'm fine, Ruby. Thank you." Evelyn's voice was soft but clear. She reached for her wallet to pay the check when the diner's front door swung open with more force than necessary. Officer Wade Harlan stepped inside, his boots heavy against the floor. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, but his face carried the kind of arrogance that made people look away. Behind him, Officer Trent Pike followed. Quieter, but just as intimidating. Wade's eyes swept the diner, taking in the morning customers until they landed on Evelyn. His expression changed instantly. The casual authority became something darker. "Well, well," Wade said, his voice cutting through the peaceful atmosphere. "Look who's back in town." Evelyn felt her chest tighten, but she kept her face calm. She had learned long ago not to show fear to men like this. Wade walked toward her booth with deliberate steps, his eyes never leaving her face. Pike moved more quietly, positioning himself near the front counter. "You remember me, don't you?" Wade asked, sliding uninvited into the booth across from her. His large frame blocked her view of the rest of the diner. "Wade Harlan, Calvin Harlan's son." Evelyn's hands tightened around her purse, but her voice stayed steady. "I remember." The name hit her like a punch to the stomach. Calvin Harlan. The former sheriff who had made her life hell 27 years ago when she tried to tell the truth about what happened to those two little boys' parents. The man who had buried evidence, silenced witnesses, and made sure justice never came. "Good," Wade said, leaning back in the booth like he owned the place. "Because I remember you too. You're the woman who tried to cause trouble for my family, filed complaints, made accusations." The diner had gone quiet. Ruby stopped wiping the counter. The couple in booth 3 stared at their plates. The old man reading his newspaper near the window kept his eyes down. Everyone could feel the tension building, but no one moved to help. "I told the truth," Evelyn said simply. Wade's laugh was cold and sharp. "The truth? You mean lies about a good man who served this county for 30 years? My father was respected, loved, and you tried to destroy that." Pike moved closer to the front door, his presence blocking the main exit. His partner positioned himself near the back hallway that led to the restrooms and kitchen. They were surrounding her without making it obvious. "You think anyone in this town forgot what you did?" Wade continued, his voice getting louder. "You think they're going to help you now?" Evelyn looked around the diner. Ruby's face was pale with fear. The other customers avoided eye contact. The silence felt heavy and dangerous. "Nobody's coming to save you this time," Wade said, reaching across the table. His fingers closed around her wrist like a trap. "Now stand up." Wade's grip on Evelyn's wrist tightened, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave marks. The pressure sent sharp pain up her arm, but she refused to cry out. She had endured worse than this arrogant boy pretending to be a man. "I said stand up," Wade growled, his voice carrying across the silent diner. "You're disturbing the peace, making customers uncomfortable with your attitude." "I'm sitting quietly in a booth," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the pain. "The only disturbance here is you." Wade's face flushed red with anger. He yanked on her wrist, trying to force her to move. "That's resisting an officer. That's a crime." Pike stepped forward from his position near the door, his hand resting on his belt. "Everyone stay in your seats," he announced to the diner, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "This is police business. Anyone who interferes will be arrested." Ruby clutched her dish rag with white knuckles, her eyes wide with terror. The couple in booth 3 hunched lower over their coffee. The old man by the window folded his newspaper with shaking hands and stared at the table. "You want to make this harder on yourself?" Wade asked, leaning closer to Evelyn's face. His breath smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. "Because I can make your day a whole lot worse than it already is." Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. "You're making the same mistake your father made." The words hit Wade like a slap. His grip on her wrist became painful, and his other hand moved to his belt, where his handcuffs hung. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," Evelyn said quietly. Calvin thought he could scare people into silence. He thought power meant he could do whatever he wanted. Look how that turned out for him. Wade's face twisted with rage. "My father was a hero. You're just a bitter old woman in a wheelchair who can't accept that nobody cares about your lies." "The truth has a way of coming out," Evelyn said, "even when corrupt men try to bury it." Wade jerked his handcuffs free from his belt, the metal clinking against his keys. "That's it. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting an officer. Maybe a night in county lockup will teach you some respect." He reached for Evelyn's other wrist, preparing to cuff her to the wheelchair, when the front door of the diner opened. 2 men stepped inside. They were tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the kind of disciplined control that came from years of military training. Their fatigues were clean and pressed, their boots silent against the floor despite their size. They were black men in their mid-30s, and their eyes immediately took in every detail of the scene. Malachi Baptiste scanned Wade's position, noting the officer's grip on Evelyn's wrist and the handcuffs in his other hand. His gaze moved to Pike near the door, cataloging the man's stance and the positioning of his equipment. Solomon Baptiste pulled out his phone and began recording, his movements calm and deliberate. Officers Wade Harlan, badge number 447, and Trent Pike, badge number 523, Solomon said clearly, his voice carrying across the diner as he documented the scene. County Sheriff's Department. Time is approximately 11:15 a.m. Wade looked up from Evelyn, his confidence still intact. "This is none of your business. Move along." Malachi stepped forward, his movement controlled but purposeful. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Release our mother." Wade's laugh was sharp and mocking. "Your mother? This old woman? Well, isn't that touching? 2 boys coming to rescue Mama." But something in Malachi's stance made Wade's confidence waver. The way he held himself, the complete lack of fear in his eyes, the military bearing that spoke of serious training. Solomon continued recording while speaking in the same calm tone. "Officer Harlan, you are currently restraining a 66-year-old disabled woman without stating charges or reading rights. Officer Pike is blocking the primary exit of a public establishment during what appears to be an illegal detention. Pike shifted uncomfortably near the door, suddenly aware that their actions were being documented by someone who clearly understood police procedure. Wade's grip on Evelyn's wrist loosened slightly, but his anger flared higher. "You think those uniforms scare me? This is my county, my jurisdiction, and this woman is under arrest." "For what crime?" Malachi asked, taking another step closer to the booth. "Disorderly conduct. Resisting arrest," Wade snapped, but his voice carried less certainty now. Evelyn looked up at her sons, pride mixing with concern in her chest. 25 years ago, they had been two frightened little boys who needed her protection. Now they stood like soldiers, trained and dangerous, ready to protect her in return. Wade seemed to sense the shift in power, and his hand moved toward his service weapon. That was when Malachi stepped in with controlled precision. The moment Wade's hand moved toward his service weapon, Malachi's training kicked in with surgical precision. He stepped forward and captured Wade's wrist in a defensive hold that looked almost gentle, but locked the officer's arm against his own body. Wade's fingers never touched his gun. The movement was so smooth that several diners didn't even realize what had happened until Wade's face twisted with pain and surprise. "Don't," Malachi said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute control. "You don't want to do that." Wade struggled against the hold, but Malachi's grip was like iron. Every attempt to break free only tightened the pressure on his joints. The handcuffs clattered to the floor as Wade's fingers went numb. Pike, seeing his partner restrained, lunged toward Solomon with his own hand reaching for his weapon. But Solomon was already moving, stepping between Pike and Evelyn's wheelchair while maintaining his recording angle. When Pike tried to grab him, Solomon redirected the officer's momentum with a smooth pivot that sent Pike stumbling sideways into the diner counter. The crash of Pike's shoulder against the coffee station made every diner gasp. Cups rattled on their saucers. The teenage busboy dropped his rag and stared wide-eyed at the controlled violence unfolding in front of him. Pike bounced off the counter and spun around, his face red with embarrassment and fury. But when he looked at Solomon, he saw a man who wasn't even breathing hard. Solomon held his phone steady, still recording, his other hand positioned to defend against any further attacks. "Jesus Christ," Pike muttered, finally understanding what kind of men they were facing. Wade's breath came in short gasps as Malachi maintained the hold without effort. The officer's uniform was wrinkled, his confidence completely shattered. Around the diner, customers whispered and pointed, many pulling out their own phones to capture the scene. Both officers attempted to reach for their weapons during what they claimed was a simple arrest for disorderly conduct. Solomon said clearly for his recording, "Excessive force protocols have been violated. Use of weapons was not justified by suspect behavior." Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Boys." The single word carried decades of authority. Malachi and Solomon both looked at her immediately, their military training taking second place to the lessons she had taught them as children. "Don't lose control," Evelyn said firmly. "This is not who we are." Malachi released Wade's wrist and stepped back, his hands visible and non-threatening. Solomon lowered his phone slightly, but kept recording. Both men positioned themselves protectively near Evelyn's wheelchair, but made no aggressive moves. Wade stumbled backward, rubbing his wrist and staring at the twins with a mixture of fear and rage. Pike remained against the counter, no longer reaching for his weapon. "Everyone in this diner needs to save their footage," Solomon announced, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "What you just witnessed is evidence of police misconduct. Upload it. Share it. Don't let anyone tell you to delete it." Several customers nodded, their phones already out and recording. Wade's face was pale with humiliation, but his anger burned brighter than his fear. "You think you're smart? You think those uniforms protect you? I'll have both of you arrested for assaulting police officers. battery on a law enforcement official, obstruction of justice. Malachi's voice remained calm and steady. Officer Harlan, your own actions are already documented. The recording shows you making unlawful physical contact with a disabled civilian. You reached for your weapon during what you claimed was a minor arrest. Your partner attempted to escalate to violence. Multiple witnesses, Solomon added, gesturing to the diner full of people. Multiple recordings. Multiple violations of use of force protocols. Wade looked around the diner and saw faces that were no longer afraid. The customers watched him with disgust and judgment. Even Ruby, who had been terrified moments earlier, stood behind her counter with her arms crossed and her mouth set in a hard line. For the first time in his career, Wade Harlan was the one who looked like the criminal. Evelyn studied her sons' faces, seeing the controlled anger burning behind their discipline. She knew they would protect her with their lives, but she also knew there were truths they needed to understand, truths she had kept hidden for 25 years. Malachi, Solomon. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of confession. There's something you need to know about Wade's father, about why he hates our family so much. Both men looked down at her, their expressions shifting from protective fury to careful attention. Evelyn took a deep breath, glancing at Wade's twisted face before meeting her son's eyes. Calvin Harlan is the man who covered up your parents' deaths. The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of Evelyn's kitchen, casting soft patterns across the worn wooden table where 3 cups of coffee sat cooling. The modest house felt smaller with Malachi and Solomon's presence filling the space, their military bearing somehow too large for the gentle domesticity Evelyn had created over decades. Evelyn's hands rested flat on the table, her wedding ring catching the light as she gathered the courage to speak truths she had buried for 27 years. The twins sat across from her, still processing the bomb she had dropped at the diner about Calvin Harlan. Your biological parents were Marcus and Angela Wright, Evelyn began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. They lived in a small house near the old textile district. Marcus worked maintenance for the county, and Angela cleaned offices downtown. Malachi leaned forward slightly, his jaw tight. You never told us their names. I was protecting you. Evelyn's eyes met his directly. Both of you. From the truth, that would have gotten you killed if the wrong people knew you were asking questions. Solomon remained silent, his analytical mind already working through implications. He watched his mother's face, reading the pain she had carried alone. 27 years ago, Evelyn continued, Marcus discovered something during his rounds at the county storage facilities. Properties that had been seized from black families were being used as fronts. Warehouses near the rail yard were storing things that didn't belong to the county. Military equipment, stolen goods, things being moved through our town like we were nobody's business. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Angela found records in the offices she cleaned. Names, payments, officials who were supposed to be protecting people but were stealing from them instead. They went to the authorities, Malachi said flatly, already understanding how the story would end. They went to Calvin Harlan. He was sheriff then. They thought he would help. Evelyn's voice hardened. Instead, he made sure they never talked to anyone else. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the old clock on the wall. Solomon's hands remained perfectly still, but Malachi's fists clenched on the table. The official report said it was a car accident on Highway 9, Evelyn said. Rainy night. Dangerous curve. 2 more black folks who drove too fast and hit a tree. Her voice dripped with bitter irony. But Marcus was the most careful driver I ever knew, and there were no skid marks. How do you know all this? Solomon asked quietly. Evelyn stood slowly, her wheelchair rolling back from the table. She moved to the old hutch in the corner and retrieved her worn Bible, its leather cover dark with age and handling. She opened it carefully, revealing a hollowed-out section where pages had been cut away. Nestled inside was a small brass key. "My husband, James, worked at the storage yard for 30 years, she said, returning to the table with the Bible. He knew Marcus. He knew something was wrong when they died. So he started watching, listening, taking notes." She lifted the key, holding it between her thumb and forefinger. "This opens Unit 47 at Riverside Storage. James hid everything there before he passed. Names, dates, license plate numbers, shipping records, things Calvin thought were buried with Marcus and Angela." Malachi stared at the key, his voice thick with emotion. "You've had this for 25 years? You've known who killed our parents? And you never told us?" "I kept you alive," Evelyn said firmly. "Do you think Calvin Harlan would have let two little black boys grow up if he knew they might remember something? If he thought they might ask questions when they got older?" "We had a right to know," Malachi said, his military discipline warring with raw anger. Solomon reached across the table and touched his brother's arm. "She's right, Mal. Look at us now. Look at what we can do. If we'd known as kids, we'd be dead." Evelyn placed the key on the table between them. "Calvin's son Wade knows you're here. He knows I testified against his father years ago. That complaint I filed, it was about Marcus and Angela. The state investigators came, asked questions, then disappeared. The case went nowhere. But Calvin never forgot." She looked at both her sons, seeing the men she had raised to be strong, disciplined, and just. "Wade's harassment today wasn't random. It was a warning. They know I still have evidence." Through the front window, the sound of a slow-moving vehicle caught their attention. Malachi rose and moved to peer through the curtains, his body automatically shifting into alert mode. A black and white patrol car crept past Evelyn's house, barely moving faster than walking speed. Through the passenger window, Officer Pike's face was clearly visible as he studied the modest home, taking note of the military vehicle parked in the driveway. "Second time," Solomon said, checking his watch. "First pass was 12 minutes ago." The patrol car reached the end of the street, turned around, and made another slow pass in the opposite direction. This time Wade was driving, his eyes fixed on Evelyn's front door with unmistakable intent. Malachi let the curtain fall back into place. "They're not backing down." "They can't," Evelyn said simply. "Too much money, too much power, too many people protected by keeping the truth buried." Solomon stood and picked up the brass key, testing its weight in his palm. "How long do we have before they figure out about the storage unit?" "James was careful," Evelyn replied. "It's not in his name, not in mine. But if they start digging through old county records, looking for connections—" "We get there first," Malachi said, his decision already made. Solomon nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. "Tonight." After dark, Evelyn watched her sons prepare to walk into the same danger that had killed their biological parents. But this time, the little boys she had raised were trained soldiers. This time, they knew what they were facing. This time, Calvin Harlan's secrets might finally see the light. Dark clouds rolled across the evening sky as Malachi pulled their vehicle into the gravel lot of Riverside Storage. The facility sat on the outskirts of town, a maze of corrugated metal buildings and chain-link fencing that had seen better decades. Security lights flickered on automatically, casting harsh shadows between the rows of storage units. "You should have stayed home," Malachi said, helping Evelyn from the passenger seat into her wheelchair. "This is my fight," Evelyn replied firmly. "Has been for 25 years. I'm not sitting in my kitchen while you boys do what I started." Solomon scanned the facility's layout, noting the placement of security cameras and exit routes. "She's right to come. If we're wrong about this, if there's nothing in that unit, we need to know immediately. No second chances." Thunder rumbled overhead as they approached Unit 47. The building was older than the others, its red paint faded to rust-colored streaks. Evelyn produced the brass key, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. The lock clicked open. Inside, the storage unit was packed with bankers' boxes, filing cabinets, and plastic tubs sealed with duct tape. Everything was organized with the methodical care of a man who understood the value of documentation. James Baptiste had been thorough. Solomon clicked on a flashlight and began systematically opening containers. Property deeds, shipping manifests, vehicle registrations. He pulled out a manila folder thick with photocopied documents. Dad was building a case. Malachi found a box of photographs. Black and white images of the warehouse district, license plates, men loading trucks in the middle of the night. Look at these dates. Marcus and Angela were watching for months before they died. Evelyn wheeled deeper into the unit, her eyes scanning labels written in her late husband's careful handwriting. She stopped at a plastic tub marked County Officials, Insurance Records. "Open that one," she said. Inside were property transfer documents, court filings, and insurance claims. Solomon spread them across an old folding table, studying the patterns. Judge Everett Marlowe. His signature is on dozens of these transfers. Land seized for back taxes, then sold to shell companies for nothing. Shell companies that Calvin's friends controlled, Evelyn added. They'd steal the land, use it for storage, then sell it back to the county at a profit. Malachi held up a photograph that made his breath catch. Solomon. Look at this. The image showed a younger Marcus Baptiste standing beside a tall white man in military dress uniform. Both men were smiling, holding documents near what appeared to be a warehouse loading dock. Solomon studied the photo, his analytical mind racing. That's Colonel Reed, our Colonel Reed. Your father was working with military investigators, Evelyn said quietly. The equipment going through those warehouses? Some of it was stolen from military bases. Marcus was helping them trace it. The implications hit both twins simultaneously. Their parents hadn't stumbled onto a local corruption ring. They had been part of a federal investigation that threatened powerful people across multiple agencies. That's why they had to die, Solomon said. A car engine cut through the evening quiet. Then another. Malachi moved to the unit's entrance and peered through a gap in the metal doors. Two vehicles were pulling into the lot, Pike's patrol car and a dark sedan with no visible markings. Company, he whispered. 3 men emerged from the vehicles. Pike wore his uniform, but the other 2 were dressed in civilian clothes that didn't quite hide the bulges of concealed weapons. They moved with purpose toward the storage buildings. "Warrant to search Unit 47, Pike called out, his voice carrying across the facility. "Property associated with an ongoing investigation." Malachi started to reach for his weapon, but Evelyn grabbed his wrist. "Cameras," she hissed, nodding toward the security lights. "They want you to fight. They want this to look like you attacked them." Solomon was already stuffing documents into a duffel bag, working with military efficiency. He grabbed the photograph of their father with Colonel Reed, the property records naming Judge Marlowe, and a leather notebook that appeared to contain names and dates. "Back gate," Malachi said, spotting an exit through the rear of the storage facility. Pike and his companions were moving methodically through the rows of units, checking numbers. They had maybe 2 minutes before being discovered. Solomon zipped the duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder, while Malachi pushed Evelyn's wheelchair toward the back of the unit. They slipped through the rear door just as Pike's voice echoed from 2 rows over. "Unit 47 should be right here." The back gate was secured with a simple chain lock. Malachi snapped it with bolt cutters from a maintenance shed, and they emerged onto a dirt road that ran behind the facility. Their vehicle was parked on the opposite side, but reaching it meant crossing through Pike's line of sight. "We go on foot," Solomon decided. "Circle around through the woods and come back for the car later." As they moved into the tree line, Evelyn clutched the notebook Solomon had saved. Inside were pages of her late husband's handwriting, documenting conversations, license plates, and shipping schedules. But more importantly, it contained a list of names. Everyone who had profited from the death of Marcus and Angela Wright. Behind them, Pike's angry voice carried through the evening air as he discovered Unit 47 standing empty, except for boxes of old tax records and family photographs. 10 minutes later, Wade's phone rang as he sat in his patrol car outside Ruby's diner. "They were here," Pike reported. "Had to have been tipped off. Place was cleaned out except for junk." Wade gripped the phone tighter. "How much did they get?" "Hard to say. But Harlan, if that old woman still has what we think she has—" Wade ended the call and stared through his windshield at the diner where Evelyn Baptiste had embarrassed him in front of the entire town. The surveillance footage had been destroyed. The witnesses had been warned to keep quiet. But if Evelyn had physical evidence linking his father to those deaths 25 years ago, if she could prove Judge Marlowe's involvement in the warehouse operation, everything they had built was about to come crashing down. The morning light filtered through Evelyn's living room curtains, casting long shadows across scattered documents that covered every surface. Coffee cups sat cold on the table beside insurance forms, property deeds, and photographs. None of them had slept. Solomon looked up from his laptop, his eyes red with exhaustion. "The news is breaking now." Evelyn wheeled closer as he turned the screen toward her. The local news anchor's voice filled the room with carefully measured authority. "Officer Wade Harlan filed charges yesterday evening against 66-year-old Evelyn Baptiste, alleging she assaulted him during what police describe as a routine welfare check at Ruby's diner. The incident escalated when Baptiste's sons, identified as military personnel Malachi and Solomon Baptiste, allegedly attacked responding officers." Malachi's jaw clenched. Routine welfare check. That lying piece of... Shh. Evelyn held up her hand, listening. The reporter continued. "Security footage from the diner has been lost due to what Ruby's diner management calls a system malfunction. Without video evidence, the incident relies on witness testimony and officer statements." The screen showed Wade standing on the courthouse steps, his uniform pressed and his expression solemn. "I was trying to help an elderly woman who appeared confused and agitated. When I approached, she became violent. Her sons arrived and immediately became hostile, using what I can only describe as military-style intimidation tactics." Evelyn's hands trembled as Wade's lies filled her living room. "He makes it sound like I was some crazy old woman causing trouble." "The footage disappearing is convenient," Solomon said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "System malfunction right after the incident? Ruby's had those cameras for years without problems." Malachi stood up, pacing to the window. "We need to go back there. Talk to Ruby face to face." "No." Evelyn's voice cut sharp through the room. "That's exactly what Wade wants. He wants you angry. He wants you making mistakes. They're calling us dangerous military men on television, Mama. They're making you look like some confused victim who attacked a cop." Solomon closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "The timeline doesn't work. Ruby told us her system automatically backs up footage every 4 hours. The incident happened at 1:15. The next backup would have been at 4. So? The news says the system malfunctioned. But if it malfunctioned before 4, there should still be footage from the previous backup. If it malfunctioned after 4, the incident footage should have been saved." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Someone erased it on purpose. Or someone inside the diner helped make it disappear," Solomon added. "Ruby was scared. Really scared. But there were other people working. The cook, that teenage busboy, the waitress who served us." Malachi stopped pacing. "We need a lawyer. A real lawyer, not some public defender who's friends with Judge Marlowe." "Naomi Bell," Evelyn said immediately. "She handled the civil rights case when they tried to close the community center. She doesn't back down from fights." Solomon was already looking up her number. "I'll call her." 20 minutes later, Naomi Bell's voice filled the room through the speakerphone. She was direct, no nonsense. "I've seen the news reports. They're painting you as the aggressors, which is a classic move. But without that video footage, it becomes your word against a police officer's." "What do we need?" Evelyn asked. "Evidence. Real evidence. Witness testimony from people who aren't family. Documentation of Wade's pattern of harassment. something that proves this wasn't random. We have documents showing Wade's father covered up murders, Malachi said. That's historical context, but it won't prove what happened in that diner. I need proof of the immediate incident. The missing footage is suspicious, but suspicion doesn't win cases. After they hung up, Solomon stared at his phone. Someone at that diner knows what really happened, and someone there had access to those cameras. Across town, Wade was making his own calls. He walked into Ruby's diner like he owned the place, his uniform pressed and his badge catching the afternoon light. The lunch crowd went quiet as he approached the counter. "Ruby," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Need to talk to your staff. Make sure everyone understands what they saw yesterday." Ruby's hands shook as she wiped down the same spot on the counter for the third time. "They already told you everything, Officer Harlan." "Did they?" Wade's smile was cold. "Because I'm hearing rumors that maybe some people are thinking about changing their stories, talking to lawyers. That kind of thing." The teenage busboy, Marcus, kept his head down while loading dishes into the plastic tub, but his ears were sharp, listening to every word. "Now, I'd hate for anyone to lose their job over confusion about what they saw." Wade continued. "Ruby's diner depends on community support, police protection, health department clearances. Lot of ways a business can run into trouble if the wrong people start causing problems." Ruby nodded quickly. "Everyone knows what they saw, officer. No confusion." Wade's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at Ruby's staff. "Good, because tomorrow, reporters might come asking questions. And I trust everyone here will tell the truth about that crazy old woman who attacked me and her dangerous sons who threatened officers." He left a $20 bill on the counter, even though he hadn't ordered anything. The message was clear. This was his town, his rules. But in the kitchen, Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. He found Solomon's number, which he'd gotten from his older sister who worked at the community center. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. I copied the diner video. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows behind Ruby's diner, where the smell of grease and old food mixed with the August heat. Solomon walked carefully between two dumpsters, checking over his shoulder before stepping into the narrow alley. His phone had buzzed 20 minutes ago with a simple message. "Meet me behind the diner. Come alone. Elias." He didn't know who Elias was, but the message had felt urgent, desperate. A thin teenager stepped out from behind the larger dumpster, his hands shaking as he clutched something small. The boy couldn't have been more than 17, with nervous eyes and the kind of careful posture that came from staying invisible around dangerous people. "You're Solomon?" the kid whispered. "Yeah. You're Elias?" The boy nodded quickly. "Elias Turner. I bus tables inside. I saw what happened yesterday. I saw everything." Solomon moved closer, keeping his voice low. "The footage is gone. They're saying the cameras malfunctioned." "That's a lie." Elias pulled a flash drive from his pocket, holding it like it might explode. "I copied it before Wade made Ruby delete everything. I knew they'd try to cover it up." Solomon stared at the drive. "Why? You don't know us." Elias's voice cracked slightly. "Your mom, Evelyn. 3 years ago, my grandmother couldn't afford her heart medication. The pharmacy wouldn't give her credit. She was gonna die." He wiped his nose with his sleeve. "Evelyn heard about it at church. She paid for a whole month of pills. Didn't want credit. Didn't want thanks. Just did it, because it was right." The boy pressed the drive into Solomon's palm. "I couldn't watch them frame her. Not after what she did for my family." Solomon closed his fist around the drive. "This could get you in serious trouble." "I'm already in trouble just for being here." Before Solomon could respond, car doors slammed in the parking lot. Heavy footsteps moved toward the alley. Solomon grabbed Elias's shoulder and pulled him behind the dumpster. Officer Pike appeared at the mouth of the alley, flanked by 2 other officers Solomon didn't recognize. Pike's hand rested on his weapon as he scanned the narrow space between the buildings. "Turner!" Pike's voice echoed off the brick walls. "We know you're back here. Come out now, and this stays simple." Elias trembled beside Solomon, who kept one hand on the flash drive and the other ready to move. The kid had risked everything to get this evidence. There was no way Solomon was letting Pike take it. "Just the kid," Pike called out. "Nobody else needs to get hurt." Solomon stepped out from behind the dumpster, placing himself between Pike and Elias. "Officer." Pike's eyes narrowed. "Baptiste. Should have known you'd be involved." He gestured to the other officers, who spread out to block both ends of the alley. "Hand over whatever Turner gave you." "I don't know what you're talking about." Pike laughed, but there was no humor in it. Security camera across the street caught the kid sneaking out here with something in his hand. Same kid who's been asking too many questions about yesterday's incident. Solomon felt Elias pressing against his back, the boy's fear radiating like heat. Pike stepped closer, close enough that Solomon could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "That drive contains stolen property," Pike said. "Evidence from an ongoing investigation. Turn it over now." "What investigation?" Solomon asked calmly. "I thought the cameras malfunctioned." Pike's face darkened. "Don't get smart with me, boy. You're already in enough trouble. Am I under arrest?" "You will be if you don't cooperate." Solomon didn't move. Pike's hand dropped to his baton, fingers wrapping around the handle. "Last chance," Pike growled. Behind Solomon, Elias whispered, "Just give it to him. I don't want you getting hurt because of me." But Solomon remembered Evelyn's words from the night before. Cruel people count on good people giving up. He looked Pike straight in the eye. "No!" Pike's face twisted with rage. He yanked the baton from his belt and swung it toward Solomon's ribs. But Solomon had been expecting it. He stepped inside the arc, deflecting Pike's arm while driving his elbow into the officer's solar plexus. Pike doubled over, gasping. The other two officers rushed forward. Solomon grabbed Elias's wrist and spun toward the bigger threat, a heavy-set cop reaching for his taser. Solomon's palm strike caught the man under the chin, snapping his head back and sending him stumbling into the brick wall. The third officer hesitated, uncertain whether to draw his weapon or try to tackle them both. That hesitation was all Solomon needed. He pulled Elias toward the diner's back entrance, which the kid had left propped open with a brick. "Kitchen!" Elias gasped. "Through the kitchen!" They burst through the door as Pike shouted behind them, "Lock down the building! Nobody leaves!" The kitchen staff scattered as Solomon and Elias raced between prep tables and industrial ovens. The cook shouted something in Spanish while diving behind the dishwasher station. Elias led Solomon through the swinging doors into the dining room, where startled customers looked up from their coffee cups. Ruby stood behind the register, her face pale as she saw them running. "You can't!" Solomon ignored her, pushing through the front doors onto the sidewalk. Evelyn's van was already waiting at the curb, engine running. Malachi sat behind the wheel, his eyes scanning the street for threats. "Get in!" Malachi shouted. Solomon shoved Elias into the back seat and dove in after him. Malachi pulled away from the curb as Pike and his officers poured out of the diner, radios crackling with urgent calls for backup. "They followed me," Elias panted, clutching his chest. "I'm sorry. I thought I was careful." Solomon held up the flash drive. "You got this to us. That's what matters." 2 hours later, they sat in Naomi Bell's office while the lawyer reviewed the footage on her laptop. The video showed everything: Wade's harassment, Evelyn's calm dignity, the officer's escalating aggression, and the twins' controlled response. It was clear, undeniable proof that Wade had lied in his report. "This changes the immediate case," Naomi said. "Wade can't claim he was attacked when this shows him as the aggressor. The charges against your mother should be dropped." "Should be," Solomon repeated. "Judge Marlowe still has to review it. And Wade's father still has influence in this county." Naomi leaned back in her chair. "One video won't bring down a conspiracy that's been operating for decades." It just proves one officer lied about one incident. Elias, who had been quiet since they arrived, suddenly spoke up. There's something else. All eyes turned to him. I've been working at the diner for 8 months. I see things, hear things. He swallowed hard. I've seen Harlan's men meeting at the old textile warehouse, the one that's been abandoned for years. Solomon leaned forward. What kind of meetings? Late at night, black SUVs, men in suits talking to guys in work clothes. Sometimes I deliver food there for Ruby. She caters their private events. Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. Whatever they're doing, it's bigger than just hassling people at the diner. The Beaumont textile warehouse loomed against the night sky like a broken tombstone. Rust streaked down its corrugated metal walls, and half the windows had been boarded up years ago. The rail yard stretched behind it, empty tracks gleaming under scattered streetlights. Malachi parked the van between 2 abandoned freight cars, hidden from the main road. He checked his watch. 11:30. Place should be empty. Solomon adjusted his earpiece. Naomi, you reading us? Her voice crackled through the comm. Clear signal. Remember, you're looking for records, not a fight. Get what you need and get out. Evelyn leaned forward from the back seat. Be careful, boys. This place... She shook her head. Your father used to say it felt wrong even before the trouble started. Elias sat beside her, nervously gripping the steering wheel though the van wasn't moving. I can come with you. I know the layout from making deliveries. No, Malachi said firmly. You stay with Evelyn. If something goes bad, you drive straight to the sheriff's station and ask for Deputy Martinez. Nobody else. The twins slipped out of the van and moved toward the warehouse. The main loading dock stood slightly open, chain lock cut clean through. Fresh tire tracks marked the gravel, still damp from the evening rain. Solomon pulled out a small flashlight, covering the beam with his fingers. Recent activity. They were here tonight. They squeezed through the gap in the loading door. Inside, the warehouse stretched into shadows. Industrial shelving units divided the space into narrow aisles. Stacks of wooden pallets created a maze of hiding spots and blind corners. Malachi motioned left, while Solomon went right. They moved with military precision, checking corners, watching for tripwires or security cameras. The air smelled of rust, old wood, and something else. Something chemical. Solomon found the first evidence tucked behind a forklift. File boxes labeled county records, sealed. He opened the top box and pulled out property deeds, foreclosure notices, and auction documents. All from the same time period. All involving black-owned businesses and family farms. Malachi, he whispered into his comm, found the paper trail. His brother's voice came back tense. Same here. Row C has shipping containers with broken seals, military equipment inside, radios, night vision, tactical gear. Solomon photographed the documents with his phone. The names made his stomach turn. Judge Marlowe's signature appeared on dozens of seizure orders. Sheriff Calvin Harlan had approved every raid. Business owners who were supposed to be community leaders had bought the stolen properties for pennies on the dollar. Then he found the ledger. It was tucked inside a manila envelope marked Insurance Claims Do Not File. The handwritten pages detailed payments, percentages, and property transfers going back 27 years. Deputies received cash bonuses for prompt seizures. Judges got vacation homes purchased with laundered warehouse profits. The whole system had been feeding off stolen black wealth for decades. His hands shook as he photographed each page. This wasn't just corruption. This was organized theft, disguised as law enforcement. Solomon. Malachi's voice carried across the warehouse, strained with emotion. You need to see this. Solomon found his brother standing over an open evidence box marked Unsolved, 1997. Inside were personal effects, case files, and photographs from their parents' deaths. But at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, was a letter written in their mother's handwriting. To my unborn sons, if anything happens to us, Solomon's flashlight beam trembled as they read together. Their mother had discovered the warehouse operation while working as a county clerk. She'd documented everything, hidden copies of records, and prepared to testify. But she was 8 months pregnant when she and their father were killed. The letter ended with a terrible truth. They know about the babies. Calvin Harlan said pregnant troublemakers raise troublemaker children. If we die, find the records I hid. Make them pay for what they took from our community. Make them pay for taking us from you. The twins stared at each other in the darkness. They hadn't just lost their parents to corruption. They had been marked for death before they were even born. Then the warehouse lights blazed on. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions. Men in tactical gear emerged from behind the shipping containers, assault rifles trained on the brothers. More figures appeared on the catwalks overhead, cutting off every escape route. Wade Harlan's voice drifted down from the highest platform, smug with victory. Well, well, look what wandered into their parents' grave. The first security man rushed Malachi from behind a forklift. Heavy boots, tactical vest, telescoping baton already drawn. Malachi spun low, driving his elbow into the man's kidney before pivoting to face the second attacker coming from his left. The warehouse erupted into chaos. "Take them alive!" Wade shouted from the catwalk. "We need to know what they already told their federal friends." Malachi ducked under a wild swing and grabbed the second man's wrist. Military close-quarters training kicked in like muscle memory. He twisted the attacker's arm, stepped through, and drove the man face-first into a steel support beam. The baton clattered across the concrete floor, but 3 more men emerged from behind the shipping containers. Solomon clutched the ledger against his chest and sprinted toward the narrow corridor between stacked pallets. Overhead, lights cast sharp shadows between the towering boxes, creating a maze of hiding spots and death traps. "Split them up," he called to Malachi. "Don't let them surround us." Pike appeared at the far end of Solomon's corridor, blocking the exit with his own baton raised. "Nowhere to run now, military boy." Solomon grabbed a loose chain hanging from an overhead pulley system. He swung it hard, forcing Pike to dodge backward into a gap between 2 pallet stacks. The narrow space meant Pike couldn't use his baton effectively, but Solomon couldn't escape either. Malachi faced worse odds in the open warehouse floor. 4 men circled him now, coordinating their attacks. One swung high while another went low. Malachi blocked the first strike, but took a brutal hit to his ribs from the second man's baton. Pain exploded through his chest. He stumbled backward, fighting for breath. "That's for making us look stupid at the diner," one of them snarled. They closed in for the kill. Malachi feinted left, then rolled right behind a heavy machinery cart. The men followed, bunching up as they rounded the corner. Perfect. He shoved the cart forward with everything he had, catching 2 of them in the legs and sending them sprawling. But the other 2 kept coming. In the narrow corridor, Pike had cornered Solomon between towering stacks of boxes. The officer swung his baton in short, vicious arcs, trying to break Solomon's grip on the ledger. "Give me those papers, boy. Save yourself some pain." Solomon dodged the first swing, but caught the second one across his ribs. White-hot agony shot through his chest. The ledger nearly slipped from his hands as he gasped for air. Pike grinned and raised the baton again. "Your parents thought they were smart, too." That was his mistake. Solomon ignored the pain and lunged forward, inside Pike's guard. He grabbed the officer's wrist with both hands and twisted hard, using Pike's own momentum against him. The baton went flying. Pike crashed backward into the pallet stack, boxes tumbling down around him. But Solomon's ribs were on fire. Every breath sent sharp knives through his chest. Meanwhile, Malachi was losing ground fast. The remaining security men had him backed against a loading platform that jutted out from the warehouse wall. Heavy steel beams supported the platform overhead, but the structure looked unstable. One man grabbed a crowbar from a nearby toolbox. "End of the line, soldier boy." Malachi dodged the first swing, but the crowbar caught the support beam behind him. The impact sent vibrations through the entire platform. Metal groaned ominously overhead. The second swing missed Malachi, but struck another support beam. The platform shuddered and started to sag. "Look out!" Solomon yelled from across the warehouse. The loading platform collapsed in a thunderous crash of twisted metal and concrete. Malachi dove forward, but one of the steel beams caught his leg, pinning him under the wreckage. He was trapped. Wade laughed from his perch on the catwalk. "Game over, boys. Should have minded your own business." That's when they heard the engine roar outside. Evelyn's van smashed through the side gate of the warehouse complex, headlights blazing through the darkness. She drove straight toward the loading dock, horn blaring, drawing attention away from her trapped sons. "What the—" Wade spun toward the noise. Solomon used the distraction to grab Malachi under the arms. Together, they managed to shift the beam enough for Malachi to crawl free. His leg was badly bruised, but not broken. "Move!" Solomon gasped, clutching his injured ribs. They stumbled toward the loading dock as Wade's men scrambled to regroup. Behind them, Pike was climbing out from under the fallen boxes, cursing and calling for backup. The twins reached Evelyn's van as she threw it in reverse. "Get in!" she shouted. "Now!" They dove through the back doors as gunshots echoed off the warehouse walls. Evelyn floored the accelerator, tires spinning on wet gravel as they raced toward the main road. But Solomon knew they hadn't won anything. They'd barely survived. And Judge Everett Marlowe was already reaching for his phone, ready to destroy them all before morning. The clock on Evelyn's kitchen wall showed 11:47 p.m., when the evidence packets were finally ready. 4 manila folders sat on the dining room table, each one containing copies of the warehouse ledger, photographs of the stolen military equipment, and witness statements from the diner incident. Naomi Bell picked up the first folder and checked its contents one more time. Federal copies go out first thing in the morning. State police get theirs by noon. The press packet goes to Channel 7 News at exactly 2 p.m. Evelyn rolled her wheelchair closer to the table. Her hands moved carefully as she sealed each envelope. 25 years I've been waiting for this moment. Malachi stood by the front window, watching the empty street. His injured leg throbbed, but he ignored the pain. Something feels wrong. It's too quiet out there. Solomon sat hunched over his laptop at the kitchen counter, his ribs wrapped in medical tape. Every keystroke sent sharp pain through his chest, but he kept working. "I'm uploading backup copies to 3 different servers. If they try to destroy the physical evidence, we'll still have digital proof." "Smart thinking," Naomi said. She glanced at her phone. "My contact at the FBI will be here at 8 in the morning to collect everything. We just need to—" Blue and red lights suddenly flooded through the front windows. Malachi stepped back from the glass. Multiple units, at least 4 cars. The house filled with flashing colors as police vehicles surrounded the property. Car doors slammed. Heavy boots stomped up the front porch steps. Solomon closed his laptop and shoved it into a bag. "They're moving fast!" A loud knock rattled the front door. "Police! Open up!" Evelyn wheeled toward the hallway. "Everyone stay calm. Let me handle this." But Malachi was already moving to the door. "No, they're not getting to you again." "Malachi, step back," Evelyn said firmly. The knocking turned into pounding. "This is Officer Wade Harlan. I have a signed court order. Open this door now, or we're coming in." Naomi grabbed her briefcase. "Court order? It's almost midnight. What judge would sign anything at this hour?" Solomon looked up from packing his equipment. "Judge Marlowe. He's covering his tracks." Malachi positioned himself in front of the door. "They'll have to go through me first." "No, they won't." Evelyn's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Son, move away from that door right now." "Ma, I'm not letting them—" "You're not letting them destroy your military career over this." Evelyn rolled her wheelchair between Malachi and the door. "I didn't raise you to throw your life away for pride. Stand down." The pounding got louder. 10 seconds, then we break it down. Malachi's fists clenched at his sides. This is wrong. Of course it's wrong. But we fight smart, not stupid. Evelyn reached for the door handle. Remember what I taught you, boys. Cruel people don't get to decide who we become. She opened the door. Wade Harlan stood on the porch with 3 other officers behind him. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, his smile cruel. He held a folded paper in his hand like a weapon. Evelyn Baptiste, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, assault on a police officer, and conspiracy. His eyes moved to the twins. Stand back, boys. This is official business. Naomi stepped forward. Let me see that warrant. Wade handed her the paper without taking his eyes off Evelyn. Signed by Judge Everett Marlowe 1 hour ago. Everything's legal and proper. Naomi scanned the document quickly. Her face went pale. This is garbage. No judge signs arrests at midnight unless… Unless what, counselor? Unless your clients are dangerous criminals planning to flee the county? Wade pushed past Malachi into the house. Search everything. She's hiding evidence. The other officers spread through the house like locusts. They pulled books off shelves, dumped drawers onto the floor, and tore through closets. One officer swept family photographs off the mantelpiece, sending frames crashing to the floor. Hey! Solomon started forward, but Naomi grabbed his arm. Don't give them an excuse, she whispered. Wade walked straight to Evelyn's wheelchair and leaned down close to her face. Where's the rest of it? I know you've got more than what we found in that warehouse. I don't know what you're talking about. Evelyn's voice stayed steady, but her hands trembled slightly on the wheelchair armrests. Wade grabbed her medication bag from the side table and turned it upside down. Pill bottles scattered across the hardwood floor, rolling under furniture and into corners. Oops, he said. Clumsy me. Malachi took a step forward. You coward! Malachi! Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip. Not one more step. Solomon pulled out his phone and started recording. This is illegal search and seizure. You don't have probable cause to… I've got a signed warrant, genius. Wade kicked one of the pill bottles across the room. That's all the cause I need. The search continued for 30 brutal minutes. They found nothing useful because Solomon had already hidden the real evidence, but they destroyed everything they touched. Wedding photos lay torn on the floor. Kitchen drawers hung open with their contents spilled everywhere. Even Evelyn's wheelchair cushion was slashed open, and the stuffing pulled out. Finally, Wade walked back to where Evelyn sat, surrounded by the wreckage of her home. Time to go, Grandma. You've got a cell waiting. She needs her medication, Solomon said. Wade looked down at the scattered pills. Should have thought of that before you decided to play detective. 2 officers moved to either side of Evelyn's wheelchair. She didn't resist as they pushed her toward the door, but her eyes found Malachi's face. Stay strong, she said quietly. This isn't over. Ma, take care of each other. That's an order. They wheeled her out into the flashing lights. Malachi and Solomon tried to follow, but Wade blocked their path. Where are you taking her? Naomi demanded. County lockup. She'll get a hearing when the judge has time. Wade's smile was pure poison. Might be a few days. Might be longer. The police cars pulled away one by one, taking Evelyn into the darkness. Malachi stood in the doorway of the destroyed house, his hands shaking with rage. We have to do something, he said. We will. Solomon was already on his phone. But not tonight. Tonight we plan. The county jail sat like a concrete tomb on the edge of downtown. Its windows were narrow slits that let in no light. Its walls were gray stone that absorbed hope and gave back nothing. Malachi and Solomon arrived 20 minutes after the police convoy. The parking lot was empty, except for a few patrol cars and a maintenance van. Visiting hours ended at 9, the desk sergeant told them. He was a heavy man with tired eyes who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Come back tomorrow. We need to see Evelyn Baptiste, Solomon said. She was just brought in. No visitors until after arraignment. Judge's orders. Malachi leaned across the counter. She's diabetic. She needs her medication. Medical will handle that. The sergeant didn't look up from his paperwork. What medication? Your officer scattered her pills all over the floor. Solomon's voice rose. She could go into shock without proper treatment. Not my problem. The sergeant finally looked at them. You boys need to leave before I have you arrested for disturbing the peace. Naomi arrived as they were walking back to their car. Her briefcase was packed with legal documents, but her face showed defeat. Marlowe froze everything, she said. He's claiming our evidence was tampered with. Says the chain of custody was broken when you two took the ledger from the warehouse without proper authorization. That's insane, Solomon said. We documented everything. Doesn't matter. He's got a friendly prosecutor who's filing motions to suppress. By the time we fight it in court, the real evidence will disappear. Malachi kicked the tire of their rental car. So they just win? They destroy our mother's house, throw her in jail, and walk away clean? Not if I can help it. Naomi's eyes were hard as steel. But we need time to build a new case. And we need Evelyn to survive whatever they're planning. Back inside the jail, Wade Harlan walked down a corridor lined with cells. His boots echoed off the concrete walls like hammer strikes. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sick shadows that danced and died. He stopped in front of cell block C, where Evelyn sat on a narrow metal bench. She'd been given an orange jumpsuit that was too big for her wheelchair-bound frame. Her silver hair was still neat, her back still straight, but her hands shook slightly from missed medication. Wade pulled up a metal chair and sat down outside the bars. His uniform was still perfect, his badge still shiny, his smile still cruel. Comfortable in there, Grandma? Evelyn looked at him with steady eyes. I've been in worse places. Have you now? Wade leaned forward. Well, you better get used to this one, because your boys can't save you this time. We'll see about that. Wade laughed. It was an ugly sound that bounced off the walls like broken glass. No, we won't see about anything. Judge Marlowe's got your evidence tied up in court. Your sons are one phone call away from losing their military careers. And you're sitting in my jail, in my county, under my rules. Evelyn said nothing. 25 years ago, you should have kept your mouth shut about my father. Now you're gonna pay for every word you said back then. Wade stood up and straightened his uniform. Sleep tight, old woman. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. He walked away, his laughter echoing down the corridor long after he disappeared. Evelyn sat alone in the cell, surrounded by concrete and steel, and the weight of 25 years of secrets. But her eyes stayed steady, and her back stayed straight. She wasn't finished yet. The county jail infirmary smelled like disinfectant and despair. Evelyn sat on a narrow examination table, her orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her small frame. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Her hands trembled from missed medication, but her eyes stayed sharp. A bored nurse checked her blood pressure without making eye contact. Sugar's low, she muttered. Doctor'll be in later. When is later? Evelyn's voice was steady despite her weakness. When he gets here. The nurse packed up her equipment and left without another word. Evelyn closed her eyes and let her mind drift back 23 years. She'd been sitting in Pastor Miriam Cole's kitchen, drinking sweet tea and watching the twins play in the backyard. They were 12 then, all knees and elbows and endless energy. What if something happens to me? She'd asked Pastor Cole that day. Nothing's gonna happen to you, Evelyn Baptiste. But what if? What if Calvin Harlan decides to finish what he started? Evelyn had pulled a manila envelope from her purse. I recorded everything I know about the night their parents died. Names, dates, places. Everything. Pastor Cole had taken the envelope with careful hands. You want me to keep this? Until the boys are old enough to handle the truth. Or until someone comes for me. Evelyn had smiled, but her eyes were serious. Whichever happens first. Now, Sitting in the jail infirmary with her body failing and her sons locked out, Evelyn knew that day had finally come. Across town, Naomi Bell pushed through the heavy wooden doors of Mount Zion Baptist Church. The morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbows across empty pews. Pastor Miriam Cole was arranging flowers at the altar, her gray hair pinned back with quiet dignity. "Pastor Cole? I'm Naomi Bell, Evelyn Baptiste's attorney." The older woman turned, her face tight with worry. "How is she?" "Not good. They're denying her medication." Naomi stepped closer. "I need to ask you something. Did Evelyn ever give you anything to hold? Documents or 23 years ago?" Pastor Cole set down her flowers. "She said someone might come asking one day." 10 minutes later, Pastor Cole led Naomi to a small office behind the sanctuary. She unlocked a filing cabinet and pulled out a sealed manila envelope with Evelyn's careful handwriting across the front. Inside was a videotape labeled Sworn Testimony, E. Baptiste, 2001, and a typed statement that made Naomi's hands shake as she read. The testimony was devastating. Evelyn had recorded herself naming Calvin Harlan as the man who covered up the murder of Marcus and Angela Wright, the twins' biological parents. She described Judge Marlowe's role in sealing the original investigation. She detailed the warehouse operation and identified specific properties stolen from black families over the decades. "She knew," Naomi whispered. "She knew they'd come back for her." By noon, Colonel Augustus Reed's military transport pulled into the courthouse parking lot. He was a tall man with steel-gray hair and the kind of calm authority that made people straighten their shoulders without thinking about it. Malachi and Solomon met him at the courthouse steps. They'd known the colonel for 5 years, but they'd never seen him look this grim. "Your mother's testimony matches everything in our federal investigation," he told them. "Those warehouses aren't just local corruption. They've been moving stolen military equipment through that rail yard for months." Military equipment? Solomon's analytical mind started connecting dots. Communications gear, night vision systems, body armor. Worth millions. Colonel Reed's jaw tightened. "We've been tracking it for 6 months. Had no idea it connected to a 25-year-old murder case." Malachi felt rage building in his chest like steam in a boiler. "So we have them. Federal charges, military theft, murder conspiracy." "Not yet." The colonel raised a hand. "Your mother prepared evidence, but we still need the physical proof. The warehouses were cleaned out after your encounter. They moved everything." "Where?" Solomon asked. "That's what we need to find out." Colonel Reed looked at both twins. "And I need you boys to understand something. You cannot storm that jail. One wrong move and they'll claim you're dangerous military men attacking police officers. The media will eat it up. So what do we do?" Malachi's voice was tight with frustration. Colonel Reed smiled for the first time since arriving. "We make them think they're winning. Then we follow them to where they're really hiding the evidence." Solomon's phone buzzed with an idea. He looked at his brother, then at the colonel. "What if they thought the ledger wasn't the only thing we found in that warehouse?" 20 minutes later, Solomon sat in Ruby's diner, speaking just loud enough for other customers to hear, while pretending to talk privately on his phone. "Yeah, I know we got the main ledger," he said, glancing around nervously. "But did you check if there was a backup copy hidden somewhere else in that building?" He paused, listening to dead air while making it look like someone was responding. "What do you mean inside the Beaumont Textile Building, the old one by the tracks?" Another pause. "Jesus, if there's a second set of records in there." Solomon ended the fake call and left the diner quickly, making sure to look worried. Within an hour, the story would spread through town like wildfire. The trap was set. Naomi Bell's law office buzzed with controlled tension as the team gathered around her desk. Maps, legal documents, and surveillance equipment covered every surface. The afternoon light slanted through Venetian blinds, casting shadows across faces marked by determination and exhaustion. Colonel Reed spread a detailed warehouse district map across the conference table. The Beaumont Textile Building sits at the corner of Industrial and Railroad Avenue. 3 entrances: loading dock on the east side, main door on the south, emergency exit on the north wall. Malachi studied the layout with military precision. Sight lines from the street, clear approach from 3 directions. But once they're inside, we're looking at a maze of machinery and storage rooms. The colonel traced routes with his finger. If they bring armed security, they'll post men at the loading dock and main entrance. Emergency exit will be their escape route. Solomon pulled out his laptop and connected to a wireless hotspot. I've been working with Elias from the diner. Kid's got steady hands, and he knows the warehouse district from when his uncle worked construction there. What's the plan? Pastor Cole asked quietly. She'd stayed through the entire meeting, her usual gentle demeanor replaced by something harder. Remote surveillance cameras, Solomon explained. Elias can get close enough to plant them without drawing attention. We'll have eyes on the building before Wade's crew arrives. Naomi finished typing on her phone and looked up. Emergency medical motion filed 20 minutes ago. Judge Matthews owes me a favor, and he's clean. Evelyn will be released temporarily for a court hearing at 8 tonight. Is she strong enough? Malachi's protective instincts flared. She's weak, but her mind is sharp as ever. And she insisted on joining the surveillance. Naomi's voice carried respect. She says she can identify Calvin Harlan's old associates if they show up. Faces you boys wouldn't recognize. Colonel Reed nodded approvingly. Federal agents will maintain distance until we confirm what they're moving. State police will provide backup, but we need solid evidence of military equipment before we can act. The office door opened, and Elias Turner slipped inside, looking nervous but determined. The 17-year-old busboy carried a small backpack and kept glancing over his shoulder. "Got the cameras," he whispered to Solomon. "Uncle Jimmy showed me how to get close to the building through the old drainage tunnel. Nobody watches that side. You sure about this, son?" Colonel Reed's voice carried the authority of someone who'd sent young soldiers into danger before. "Miss Evelyn helped my grandmother when nobody else would. I'm sure." Malachi studied the teenager's face and saw something familiar. The same quiet courage Evelyn had taught him and Solomon years ago. Stay low, stay quiet, and get out fast. Don't try to be a hero. As the sun began to set, the team's carefully orchestrated plan moved into motion. Elias disappeared through the drainage system with Solomon's cameras. Naomi drove to the courthouse to collect Evelyn. Colonel Reed coordinated with federal units positioned throughout the county. The planted rumor had already reached its target. Wade Harlan slammed his phone down in the police station break room, his face flushed with anger and panic. "Pike, get your ass in here!" Officer Trent Pike appeared in the doorway, already reaching for his duty belt. "What's the problem?" "Those military boys found something else. Backup records in the old Beaumont building." Wade's voice cracked with stress. "We need to move everything tonight before federal warrants come through." "How many men?" "Call Marcus and his crew. Tell them it's double pay and bring heavy equipment." "We're burning that place to the ground." Across town, Judge Everett Marlowe locked his courthouse office and walked quickly to the parking garage. His hands shook slightly as he started his luxury sedan. For 23 years, he'd controlled every legal challenge to their operation. But federal involvement changed everything. He couldn't trust Wade and Pike to handle this properly. Too much was at stake. His reputation, his legacy, his freedom, all of it depended on destroying the evidence completely. The judge pulled out of the courthouse parking lot just as federal surveillance units received confirmation that all primary targets were moving toward the warehouse district. In the darkness beyond the city limits, tactical teams checked their equipment and waited for the signal. The trap Evelyn Baptiste had spent 23 years preparing was finally closing. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the Beaumont textile warehouse like machine gun fire. Water cascaded from broken gutters, creating muddy rivers across the cracked asphalt. Through the darkness, Headlights cut through the storm as Wade Harlan's convoy pulled up to the rear loading gate. 3 pickup trucks and a panel van formed a tight circle around the loading dock. Wade jumped out of the lead truck, his police jacket already soaked through. "Pike, get those doors open. We've got maybe 2 hours before this place crawls with feds." Officer Trent Pike wrestled with the rusted gate mechanism, while 4 private security contractors emerged from the other vehicles. They wore tactical gear, but moved with the lazy confidence of men who'd never faced real opposition. Marcus Webb, their leader, spat tobacco juice into the rain and shouldered a crowbar. "How much stuff we moving?" Marcus called over the storm. "Everything. Military crates, file boxes, anything that connects back to the old man's operation." Wade's voice carried panic beneath the authority. "Judge wants it all burned tonight." A black sedan pulled up behind the convoy. Judge Everett Marlowe stepped out carefully, his expensive shoes slipping on wet concrete. Even in the storm, he maintained his courthouse dignity. Pressed suit, gold watch, silver hair perfectly styled. But his hands shook as he surveyed the warehouse. "Gentlemen, we have a narrow window," the judge announced. "Federal surveillance units are already moving through the county. This ends tonight, permanently." 2 miles away, Evelyn Baptiste sat in the passenger seat of Naomi's surveillance van, watching live feeds from Solomon's cameras on a small monitor. Rain streaked the windshield, but the infrared images inside the warehouse showed clearly. Her weathered hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, knuckles white with tension. "There," she whispered, pointing at the screen. "The tall one with the gray beard. That's Ernest Polk. He used to run payments for Calvin back in the day." Naomi leaned closer to the monitor. "And the other one?" "Billy Garrett. Worked maintenance at the courthouse for 30 years. Calvin's inside man." Evelyn's voice hardened with old anger. Those 2 helped hide what happened to the boy's parents. Inside the warehouse, Solomon crept along the eastern wall, his injured ribs sending sharp pain through his chest with each breath. Water dripped steadily from ceiling leaks, masking the sound of his movement. Across the main floor, Malachi moved parallel to him, both twins converging on the office area where their intelligence indicated Harold Sutter was hiding. The warehouse bookkeeper huddled behind a metal desk in the manager's office, clutching a cardboard box filled with shipping logs and payment records. Harold Sutter had worked for the conspiracy for 15 years, maintaining records he'd hoped never to understand. Now federal agents wanted his testimony, and Wade's crew wanted him dead. "Please," Harold whispered to himself, rocking slightly. "I just kept the books. I didn't kill nobody." Solomon reached the office door first and tapped gently. "Mr. Sutter, we're here to get you out safely." The frightened man looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "You're the Baptiste boys. I heard about you. Can you walk?" "Yes, sir." "Got everything right here." Harold lifted the box with shaking hands. "Proves where the money came from, where it went, who signed for what." On the main floor, Marcus Webb used his crowbar to pry open wooden crates stamped with military inventory numbers. Inside, night vision equipment, tactical radios, and body armor sat wrapped in plastic. "Jesus, Wade, this is federal prison stuff." "Shut up and load the truck," Wade snapped, his arrogance cracking under pressure. Pike dragged file boxes toward the loading dock while Ernest Polk poured gasoline across stacks of county records. The smell of fuel mixed with warehouse dust and rain-soaked concrete. Billy Garrett worked methodically, feeding documents into a metal drum where flames already crackled. Solomon helped Harold to his feet just as footsteps echoed across the warehouse floor. Wade had spotted movement near the office. "We got company," Wade shouted, pulling his service weapon. "Pike, Marcus, spread out and find them." The confrontation erupted instantly. Pike charged toward the office, while Marcus and 2 contractors moved to flank the twins. Solomon pushed Harold behind an overturned table and drew his sidearm. "Federal agents are 30 seconds out," Solomon called across the warehouse. "Stand down, and nobody gets hurt." Wade laughed harshly. "Lies. You boys are alone, just like your mama. Pike reached the office first, swinging his baton in a vicious arc. Solomon ducked and drove his shoulder into Pike's midsection, ignoring the explosion of pain from his injured ribs. Both men crashed into the metal desk, scattering Harold's carefully organized papers. Pike rolled and came up swinging again. Thought you military boys were supposed to be tough. Solomon blocked the baton with his forearm and landed a solid punch to Pike's jaw. The officer stumbled backward, blood streaming from his split lip. They circled each other on the slick concrete floor, rain from broken skylights making every step treacherous. Meanwhile, Malachi engaged 3 security contractors near the loading dock. Marcus Webb swung his crowbar like a club, while the other 2 tried to surround him. Malachi moved with practiced efficiency, using wooden pallets and machinery to break up their coordinated attack. "Take him down!" Marcus roared. One contractor rushed forward with a tire iron. Malachi sidestepped and used the man's momentum to send him crashing into a support beam. The second contractor hesitated just long enough for Malachi to close distance and disarm him with 2 precise strikes. Back in the office area, Solomon and Pike continued their brutal fight. Pike swung his baton overhead, trying to crush Solomon's skull. Solomon caught the officer's wrist and twisted hard, forcing Pike to drop the weapon. Then Solomon drove his elbow into Pike's solar plexus, doubling him over. "Stay down," Solomon ordered, breathing heavily. Pike gasped and reached for his radio. "All units, warehouse, need backup." Solomon yanked the radio away and crushed it under his boot. "Nobody's coming to save you this time." Across the warehouse, Wade watched his crew falling apart. Judge Marlowe had retreated to his sedan, unwilling to risk his reputation in an actual fight. The federal units would arrive any moment, and his only hope was eliminating the witnesses. Wade's eyes fixed on the surveillance van parked beyond the fence line. If the Baptiste brothers were here, that meant their precious mama was watching everything. Wade holstered his weapon and sprinted toward the rear exit, his police jacket streaming water. He crashed through the gate and ran across the muddy parking area, rage replacing panic in his voice. "Time to finish what my daddy started," Wade snarled, pulling his service pistol as he approached the van, where Evelyn sat calmly watching the warehouse feeds. Wade's boots splashed through muddy puddles as he yanked open the surveillance van's door. Rain poured off his police jacket, and his service weapon gleamed under the van's interior lights. Evelyn sat calmly in her wheelchair, watching the warehouse feeds on multiple screens. "Well, well," Wade sneered, climbing into the van. "The old cripple thinks she's running some kind of operation." Evelyn's hands remained steady on her wheelchair's armrests. She did not flinch when Wade pointed his gun at her chest. Her voice was quiet, but clear. "You look scared, Officer Harlan." "Shut your mouth!" Wade's face twisted with fury. "Your boys think they're so smart, but they can't save you from here." He grabbed the van's radio microphone and keyed the transmission. "Malachi! Solomon! I got your precious mama right here. Drop your weapons and walk out of that warehouse with your hands up, or I blow her head off." Evelyn watched Wade's trembling hands and saw the desperation behind his rage. Without breaking eye contact, she pressed a small button on the communication panel. The van's external speakers crackled to life, broadcasting everything Wade said across multiple channels. "You're transmitting to federal agents, local news crews, and state police," Evelyn said calmly. "Every word you just spoke is being recorded." Wade's eyes widened as he realized what she had done. "You think you're clever? Nobody cares about some old black woman in a wheelchair. They care about corrupt police officers threatening disabled witnesses on live audio," Evelyn replied. "Your daddy taught you to be cruel, but he never taught you to be smart." Through the van's speakers, federal voices crackled with urgent coordination. "All units, we have an officer threatening a civilian witness. Move to intercept immediately." Wade pressed the gun barrel against Evelyn's temple. "Turn it off! Turn off the transmission!" "I will not," Evelyn said firmly. 25 years ago, Your father silenced people like me. Today, the whole world is listening. Wade's radio squawked with frantic messages from Pike. Wade, they got us surrounded. The whole operation is blown. Judge Marlowe is trying to run. Pike, you coward! Wade screamed into his radio. Hold your position. Through the rain-streaked windshield, Evelyn saw a familiar silhouette moving across the parking area. Malachi approached the van with deadly precision, but he did not charge blindly. He positioned himself behind Wade's line of sight, waiting for the right moment. Wade was too focused on the radio to notice. Pike! Marcus! Somebody answer me! Solomon's voice came through Pike's abandoned radio, calm and professional. Officer Pike has agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. The warehouse is secure. Wade spun toward the radio, his weapon turning away from Evelyn for just 1 second. That was all Malachi needed. Malachi's hand shot through the open van door, grabbing Wade's wrist and twisting hard. Wade's scream echoed across the parking lot as his gun flew into the mud. Malachi dragged him out of the van and slammed him face first against the vehicle's side panel. "You're under arrest," Malachi said, his voice cold with controlled fury. Solomon appeared with Pike's radio and federal zip-tie restraints. Pike's talking. He's giving up everything about the warehouse operation, the stolen equipment, and Judge Marlowe's financial network. Through the communication system, federal voices coordinated the final arrests. Target is attempting to flee through the rail yard. Colonel Reed, do you have visual? Colonel Reed's voice came back steady and authoritative. Judge Marlowe is in custody near the train tracks. He was attempting to destroy additional files when we intercepted him. Evelyn activated the van's external camera as federal agents led Judge Marlowe away in handcuffs. News crews captured everything. The respected county judge stumbling through mud and rain, his expensive suit ruined, his reputation destroyed. The recovered files prove former Sheriff Calvin Harlan covered up the deaths of James and Marie Baptiste, Solomon reported through the radio system. Evelyn Baptiste's testimony and the warehouse records provide complete evidence of the conspiracy. Wade struggled against his restraints as cameras focused on him. This is bullshit. My family built this county. We protected these people. From what? Evelyn asked from her wheelchair, her voice carrying clearly through the external speakers. From justice? From the truth about what you did to innocent families? Federal agents surrounded Wade as he was formally arrested. Camera lights cut through the rain as news crews documented every moment. Wade Harlan, the arrogant officer who had terrorized Evelyn in Ruby's diner just days earlier, now stood handcuffed and exposed before the entire community. Evelyn watched silently from her wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap, as Wade was loaded into a federal transport vehicle. She did not smile or celebrate. She simply observed as the man who had tried to silence her was finally held accountable for his crimes. The same courthouse where Wade Harlan had once swaggered through marble hallways now buzzed with federal agents, news crews, and packed galleries. Evelyn Baptiste rolled her wheelchair through the main entrance, flanked by Malachi and Solomon in their dress uniforms. The twins walked with quiet dignity, their bearing respectful but vigilant. District Attorney Patricia Williams stood at the podium, holding a thick folder of federal indictments. Today, we announce charges against 14 defendants in what investigators are calling the most extensive corruption case in county history. Camera flashes illuminated the courtroom as the charges were read aloud. Wade Harlan faced federal counts of civil rights violations, conspiracy, theft of government property, and witness intimidation. His arrogant smirk from Ruby's diner had been replaced by a pale, hollow stare as he sat between two federal marshals. Former Judge Everett Marlowe is charged with racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice, Williams continued. Mr. Marlowe used his position to facilitate the illegal seizure and transfer of properties belonging primarily to black families and elderly residents. Marlowe, stripped of his robes and judicial authority, kept his eyes down as photographers captured his fall from grace. The man who had once controlled the legal system from behind sealed files now faced decades in federal prison. Officer Trent Pike sat at the prosecution table, having agreed to full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mr. Pike has provided extensive testimony detailing the warehouse network, naming corrupt officers, and identifying businessmen who participated in the conspiracy, Williams announced. Pike's betrayal sent ripples through the courtroom gallery. Local officials shifted uncomfortably as Pike's testimony implicated them in years of coordinated theft and intimidation. The most shocking moment came when 71-year-old Calvin Harlan was escorted into the courtroom in handcuffs. The former sheriff, once the most powerful man in the county, now faced federal charges for the cover-up of James and Marie Baptiste's deaths 27 years earlier. Calvin Harlan orchestrated the murders of James and Marie Baptiste when they discovered the warehouse operation, Williams stated clearly. He then falsified reports and intimidated witnesses to protect the criminal network. Evelyn watched without emotion as Calvin Harlan was formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. The man who had destroyed her son's biological family finally faced consequences for his crimes. Wade Harlan's sentencing drew the largest crowd. Federal Judge Rachel Torres addressed him directly from the bench. Officer Harlan, you used your badge to terrorize the very citizens you swore to protect. Your crimes against Mrs. Baptiste and other vulnerable residents represent the worst abuse of police authority. Wade was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As marshals led him away in shackles, he passed directly in front of Evelyn's wheelchair. He refused to look at her, but she spoke quietly as he walked by. Your father taught you cruelty, Evelyn said. I taught my sons justice. That's the difference between us. The courtroom erupted in applause as federal agents announced the final phase of restitution. Families whose properties had been stolen through fraudulent seizures would receive full compensation from assets recovered from the conspiracy. The entire warehouse district, valued at over $3 million, was awarded to the county for community development. County Commissioner Sarah Mitchell stepped to the microphone with a prepared statement. The seized warehouse property will be converted into the Baptiste Family Veterans and Senior Justice Center, honoring Evelyn Baptiste's courage in preserving the truth when others chose silence. Malachi and Solomon flanked their mother's wheelchair as the announcement was made. They were not the rescuers anymore. They were sons honoring the woman who had saved them first, the woman who had carried 25 years of dangerous truth until justice could finally be served. The courthouse crowd rose to their feet as Evelyn accepted the community's recognition with quiet grace. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.